France's government looks set to crumble for the second time in a year as another prime minister calls a confidence vote over budget cuts. Francois Bayrou says he will fight like a dog to win against all odds. But is there any way he can avoid a political and economic disaster? Hello and welcome to Roundtable. I'm Enda Brady. Now, the French government is on the brink of collapse. Its debt is out of control and the unions are planning huge protests. Prime Minister Bayrou was appointed after his predecessor, Michel Barnier, lost a confidence vote himself over the same issue less than a year ago. In the face of likely defeat, will President Macron appoint another prime minister or risk it all and call a fresh general election?
France's Prime Minister, Francois Bayrou, is risking his political future, asking the nation to choose between him or chaos and disaster.
An immediate danger weighs on us, which we have to face, not tomorrow or the day after, but today without any kind of delay. Our country is in danger because we are at risk of over-indebtedness.
If opposition parties vote against him in a confidence vote over $50 billion worth of budget cuts, as they claim they will, he himself will be at risk of being booted out of office. Finance Minister Eric Lombard has warned that the country could need a bailout from the International Monetary Fund if its deficit, now approaching 6% of GDP, is not addressed. But European Central Bank President Christine Lagarde, herself a former IMF chief and former French finance minister, has poured cold water on those claims. She said, "Countries turn to the IMF when they face a severe current account deficit and are unable to meet their obligations. That is not the case for France today." The rest of France's political parties tend to agree that the situation isn't yet dire enough to require this level of austerity, and Bayrou's suggestion to lose 2 public holidays in a country famous for its work-life balance was never going to be a vote winner. It's the National Rally Party, currently topping the opinion polls, which could gain the most from this crisis if a defeat forces Macron to call a general election.
We, Jordan and myself, are calling for an ultra-rapid dissolution because the reality is that the new majority emerging from these new elections must be able to construct a budget so that our country has a budget. That is, in reality, the only democratic solution.
Will Bayrou's gambit pay off, or is defeat a fait accompli?
Well, let's meet our guests on this one. Joining us from Paris, we have the journalist Elaine Cobbe. In Marrakesh, in Morocco, we have Professor Raphael Liogier. He's from the Institute of Politics in Provence. And from Bengaluru, we have in southwestern India, Simon Toubeau. He's Associate Professor at the School of Politics and International Relations at the University of Nottingham. And I'm delighted to say, joining me here in the studio, we have the former Special Advisor to the UK's Home Office, Claire Pearsall. You're all very welcome to Roundtable. Elaine, to you first of all, France just seems to feel very rudderless at the moment.
Absolutely. Prime Minister Francois Bayrou surprised everyone, including many of his own cabinet, by instead of coming up with concessions on the unpopular budget, he said, "I want a confidence vote in my government." And now he is struggling to see if he can get enough people to actually vote in favour. Now, it was a calculated risk because there were no confidence votes coming up against him, and it's much easier to get a confidence vote. It's a simple majority, but he still has to try to talk to everyone and persuade them, and he's not doing so well. There are high-level meetings on all this week, including with President Macron now getting in on the act and trying to persuade the government parties to get out there and work some kind of compromise to bring in some of the other political groupings. So far, not doing so well, and Bayrou must know that his days at least are numbered.
Let's bring in Raphael. Raphael, to you, just how serious is this now for France?
What do you mean, how serious it is? I mean, economically, it's very bad, and politically, it's a real turmoil. And I think, in fact, that I disagree on one point. I don't think actually Francois Bayrou wanted to fight. I think it is the other way around. He didn't want to struggle. That's the reason why he called for a vote of confidence, because he didn't want to fight for the budget to discuss with everybody all the time, and it would last until November and even December and I don't know what. So he decided to just bet right now with a vote of confidence, like to stay or to leave. I think he's tired, to say the truth, and he doesn't want to carry on himself if he doesn't get through right from the start. It's actually, as I said, because he doesn't want to struggle, because as it was said, it wasn't compulsory for him. He didn't have to do this vote of confidence. He didn't have to ask for that.
Thank you, Raphael. Simon, to you, just from a broader European perspective, how worrying is this, what we're seeing in France right now?
There are some very clear economic repercussions. First is that the level of interest on French debt has increased. The spread with the German bonds has increased, and France is now paying interest rates on its debt that is closer to Italy than in the past. So there's growing distrust by credit markets that the French government is going to be able to introduce a government which is going to tackle the deficit and tackle spiraling debt. That is having a knock-on effect on the French economy. So on the equity markets, the French stock market has lost a lot of value. A lot of the French banks have seen a lot of their value on the stock market decrease. And so there's genuine concern.
Thank you, Simon. Claire, we're seeing a real fragmentation of politics, not just in France, in the UK, if you look at voting intentions as well. What's driving this kind of disdain for politics and politicians that people are having right now?
I think there are a number of issues, and this is where the situation in France is very similar to the United Kingdom. You have an enormous debt mountain, you have a problem with immigration, you have increased spending on things like defence. Where are you going to get that money from? And in the United Kingdom, we've seen years of austerity measures coming in, which is what Francois Bayrou wanted to bring into France as well, and to increase the pension age, because they have a largely ageing population, very similar to the United Kingdom, and that brings with it enormous cost. So I think that people are unhappy at those because it goes against what people want, which are lower taxes, better services, and for the government to largely leave them alone. But unfortunately, that now can't happen. And I think you see this fragmentation going on between what is going to serve you better. The parties that certainly shout louder tend to be much more on the right, much more populist, and they are attracting a lot of the younger voters coming through. It's quite interesting to see the rise of sort of anywhere between 18 and 25-year-olds, the parties that they wish to vote for. We're very, very different to people in their 35 to 45 age bracket.
Thanks, Claire. Elaine, talking of shouting very loudly, let's talk about Marine Le Pen and Jordan Bardella, her sidekick. National Rally, they're now calling for an immediate dissolution of the French Parliament and another election. Just explain to our viewers how Le Pen can be involved when she's actually banned from running.
Well, yes, she's still on the sidelines, but very much at the center of the National Rally Party. Jordan Bardella is the president. She is still hoping that her appeal will go through in time for the next presidential election in 2027. It's not likely, but not completely impossible. So she is refusing to leave the political stage because she wants that job. So she is still in there. They had meetings with Bayrou and came out saying, nope. Bardella said there was no miracle. We are at completely the other end of the spectrum from what Bayrou wants. And we think the government should just go now and call elections. Now, Just because they're saying it doesn't mean it will happen, but it is playing into their followers, their supporters who are saying, seriously, all that keeps happening is new governments, new reworking of the same measure. Let's not forget that Bayrou's government came in after the no confidence votes in December. And if he's tired already, well, frankly, he's been begging for that job for decades. And he really, he hasn't done enough with it. And last July, we had elections, snap elections, Macron called, in the hope of uniting the country. That didn't work. The only people he's united are the unlikely bedfellows of far right and far left against him. So the National Rally Party still working hard on the sidelines to say, no, we are still a major player. They did do very well in those July elections, even though they were kept out. And they really are determined to say, we're part of the landscape, we're not going away.
Raphael, to you, it's clear Marine Le Pen is not going away, but can you see any scenario where Bardella or her end up leading France?
Of course, I see this kind of scenario because I think we are living, and it's true that it's not only in France; it's a European thing. There is what I call the European complex. European complex is started around 2003, and you have those new political parties that are populist party that wants to defend identity, the identity of the real French. You have that, the identity of the real British in Britain, of the real German in Germany, and everything. And so you have just one alternative now when you are a politician. Either you choose to speak rationally about the situation, and it's what Francois Bayrou has chosen at first, like talking about economy and what we need, austerity, what we need to do technically, etc., etc. And you have the other way to talk about identity, the fact that we need to save the French identity, or even we need to save the identity of a certain part of the population. And what is interesting is that the most successful discourse is the identity discourse, because this complex, the European complex, is getting deeper and deeper year after year. But what is interesting in the attitude of Francois Bayrou, it is that at first he had his rational, very rational discourse. And in the second time, when he saw that it didn't work, he started to enter into identities, like saying that some part of the population, and he identified them, are responsible. He started to say it's the retired people that are against the young people. The same way, like the far left will say it's the rich that are against the poor, or you have the Front National, the Rassemblement National, the far right, that will say it's the immigrants or the Muslim against the real French. And so Francois Bayrou was trying to get out of this kind of discourse, but it doesn't work. So he is himself trying now to pretend that there are some identities that are against other identities, because he knows it works well. But obviously, it is a little bit too late to convince people.
Thanks, Raphael. That's fascinating. Simon, to you, should we feel sorry for Francois Bayrou because he's done his best? He's told the people of France that they need to work more, they need to pay more tax, this debt needs to come down. He's just being very honest, isn't he?
I don't think we should feel sorry for him, and I don't think that for a couple of reasons. But the main one is really that he's basically the second installment of a same strategy, and that strategy has been Macron's strategy of trying to govern from the center in the absence of a parliamentary majority. And that strategy has meant two things. You appoint a prime minister from your centrist camp. So he appointed Michel Barnier in the autumn of last year from Les Républicains. And when Barnier's government fell, he appointed Bayrou, he's a Christian Democrat. He's not quite on the right as the Républicains, but he's part of the support base of Macron. And the other component of this strategy has been to present to the parliament a fairly tough budget. Now, there are some very important constraints and pressures that mean that the French government has to tackle that with a sense of urgency. But the budget has been more or less the same, trying to generate lots of savings, 60 billion in the case of Barnier, 44 billion in the case of Bayrou. And in both cases, with a mix of spending cuts and tax raises, but which has been slanted more towards the spending cuts than towards tax raises, mainly because it preserves the business-friendly environment that Macron has been trying to create.
Thanks, Simon. Claire, do you see similarities between Macron of France and Starmer in the UK? A lot of energy being expended on big international situations. We see them travelling, we see them on international TV, but domestically really struggling.
And I think that's the really important factor. When you're prime minister of a country, you have to look after the citizens of that country. And if they feel that you're not paying attention, that you are not listening, that is when other people can creep in with their ideology. And I think that both President Macron and Keir Starmer in the United Kingdom suffer from that. You have events on the world stage which are incredibly important, which affect us all, especially when you're looking at places like Ukraine, you're looking at Gaza in the Middle East. But if you cannot contain your citizens at home, if you cannot suggest that your economy is falling and you need to do something about that, and this is going to be hard, but it's for the best, if you're not going to take those people with you, then it is doomed to failure. And unfortunately, we have seen that time after time. It doesn't mean, however, that should any kind of populist from the left or the right, from populist parties gain government, it doesn't mean life is going to be any better. It just means that there are different ideas. So I think that we have to be careful as nations to not rush into that kind of decision.
And Claire, just tell me from your experience in the Home Office in the UK government, I think a lot of UK politicians will be watching this quite selfishly, wondering, are they going to honour commitments about migrant boats coming across and changes to maritime law?
I think there's always been a concern with working across the channel because no nation realistically wants to take that burden of people making that perilous journey. So you can understand from the French side, they're going to look at it and say, this is a British problem, but the British are saying, we need your help because they're coming from your shores. So I think that it's always been a very fragile relationship when it comes to migration across the channel. I think that the United Kingdom has invested a lot of money. I don't think that's always been spent in the best way, but also I don't think Britain quite understands the geography of France, the pressures that they are under themselves with migration. It all adds up to a massive problem. But you can see that there will be some people in the Home Office very scared that that money is now gone and nothing will be seen for it.
Thanks, Claire. Elaine, to you, just give us your feeling of what the French public are thinking and feeling right now.
The public are tired. They're tired of this constant change, the constant talk of a budget to fix the economy, which has been going since last year, and nothing has actually happened. And there's a huge feeling here that the average person is being asked yet again to accept the cuts in public services, to pay more taxes. And anytime there's any talk of taxing the super rich, that just sort of quietly goes away because Macron's economic view is very much that if the super rich keep their money, they will stay in France and the money will trickle down, despite not a huge amount of evidence to that. So there's a lot of unhappiness. And also, don't forget, this is France. It's la rentrée. People are just back from holidays and they're still slightly half on the beach thinking, oh no, not again, not more politics, not another election, not another government falling, must we? So there are concerns that should there be an election, there could be high abstentionism. There's also the issue of whether or not if there is a new prime minister, will there have to be new talks about a new budget? So 7 out of 10 French people say they want Bayrou to lose this confidence vote because they're tired of it. And there are strikes called for September 10 and September 18, huge across-the-board public service strikes on the 10th to shut down railroads, hospitals, pharmacies, schools. And on the 18th to back that up with even more. Now, the vote could make a difference to that. But for the moment, the unions are gearing up for it. And on the other side, the employers' associations are saying, we're not convinced either.
Let's go back to Raphael. Just tell us, Raphael, where does this leave President Macron? Because these are two horses, his riders. He's backed these guys to the hilt, and it looks like they're both fallen.
Yeah, I think he's in a very bad situation. I think he's in a very bad situation, and I think the main problem of France is that we can see that it's a systemic crisis. But every time we have a new prime minister, he tries to solve a systemic problem with specific technical measures. It was said there is the immigration problem, but there is also the debt problem, and there are other problems, out of works and all that. And I think it needs a change, a systemic change. And as a matter of fact, the measures are not only technical measures, but if you analyze them, you can see that they're always negative measures. But a way to talk about negative measures is to say that it is a cut. You need to cut here, to cut there, to cut, the pension, to cut the number of public servants, to freeze the pension, and you need to suppress public holidays, etc., etc. I think what the French would like is what I would call positive measure, but positive measure needs to have some kind of an idea of where to go, what to reach, what is the target, what is the aim, some kind of, we could call, I don't know, like some kind of a political transcendence, something that goes beyond just the technical measures. Of course, you want to do that, but what kind of society do you want? What kind of society? And so that's the reason why the far left and the far right are having, have such a success. Because maybe what they say is unrealistic, but they give something positive about the kind of society they want, even if it is not realistic. And so I think if you want to govern in the middle, like Macron wants to do, obviously, you also need to say something that is not only technical, but systemic, and not only negative, but positive for the future. If you don't do that, you always have the far right and the far left, and it's where France is now. So, of course, I haven't answered the institutional situation, because the institutional situation is just like, for Macron, it's just, let's find a new prime minister here in this parliament, or let's change the parliament. I think he will try to find a new prime minister in this parliament.
Thank you, Raphael. Claire, I just want to come to you on the whole issue of fixing the system. We hear this a lot in France. There's been discussion about it in the UK and other countries as well. But in all honesty, no politician who gets power is going to sit down and think, I'm now going to change the system that got me in.
I think also the problem is anybody who says, oh, we need to fix the system, when it breaks down, when you ask them what it is that they want to fix, it's going to be different for each person. There'll be some people who value education, some people who bring immigration to the table, some people will bring a health service or transport. It's very, very difficult to please everybody. And I think that's where politicians try very hard to bring everybody with them. But unfortunately, you are always going to upset 50% of the population at any one time in any given decision. So I think it's incredibly hard to do that. You do have to bring people with you. And I do agree that there needs to be positivity. There needs to be a message of this is going to be difficult for 2, 3, 4 years. And then it is going to look like this. And I think that if you give people a clear path, you give them an idea of what it is you're aiming for, whether they agree with you politically or not, they can see the purpose of you doing it, and they're more likely to come with you.
Thanks, Claire. Simon, just briefly, how vital are the next couple of weeks then for France and the European Union? Because we need a strong France in Europe.
Macron has ruled out calling new legislative elections. He has called on the leaders of the parties in the parliament to try and forge a new agreement. Everything depends on the result of Bayrou's discussions with the spokespersons of those parties in the parliament. And if those don't work out, what happens after his government falls, and Macron then has to think about his strategy domestically and about who he invites to form a new governance, and there will need to be a change of tactic because the one he's pursued so far hasn't worked. And I agreed with my colleagues here insofar as there needs to be a different kind of message. It needs to be a positive message. It needs to be a message about change. And I think that having some kind of multi-party coalition at the heart of the French government that probably has a prime minister who comes from the center left would be a reasonable change of tactic.
Thanks, Simon. Final word to Elaine. Just look into the French crystal ball for us next week, Elaine. Is the government going to fall?
It is unlikely that the confidence motion will pass. Now, it depends on how the talks go at the moment. It's very much a numbers game. And the fact that Macron has got involved to say, please, can we tweak things to appeal to the left, shows just how worried they all are. But also the Republicans, the centre-right party, they're not entirely convinced of what they're going to do, and they're in government. They were taken completely by surprise by this. So it remains to be seen, but honestly, not many people are expecting Bayrou to still be prime minister on the 9th, unless Macron says, have a caretaker government, stay for another while we yet again work it out.
Elaine, thank you. To Simon, Raphael and Claire Pearsall here in the studio with me. Thank you all. Remember, you can see more discussion and debate on our YouTube channel. Just search for Roundtable TRT World. But for now, from me, Enda Brady, and all the team here, goodbye and thank you for watching.